This is Finance Arcana. And today, on episode 1 of Forbidden History, we're breaking down the Petrodollar Conspiracy, how oil became America's invisible weapon. And trust me, this story is wild. Huge stakes, insane twists, and a truth about global money that almost nobody talks about. Let us jump straight in. Here's the forbidden claim. The modern global economy runs not on oil, but on a secret agreement that turned crude into a financial weapon disguised as an energy system. And almost nobody realizes how fragile that arrangement truly is. The shock comes fast. More than 80% of global oil sales for decades have been priced in one currency, giving one empire the ability to project power without firing a shot. But here's the twist. That dominance was never natural. It was engineered in the shadows during a moment of near collapse. So the mystery becomes this: how did the United States turn the world's most volatile commodity into a monetary anchor that protected its empire cycle decay while pushing structural fragility onto everyone else? And what happens when the rest of the world finally challenges it? The answer hides in a deal so secret that even Congress wasn't fully briefed. Money moves in shadows long before it moves markets. Even early crypto advocates use this forgotten structure as a contrast to systems that try to escape state-backed liquidity monopolies. But the cost of this hidden architecture was paid by ordinary people through inflation spikes, wage stagnation, and the quiet erosion of national autonomy around the world. And this part is almost never told. The conspiracy begins with a crisis no one saw coming.
To understand the petrodollar's birth, we must step into the early 1970s, a world slipping into geopolitical disequilibrium. America was still the global superpower. But beneath the surface, empire cycle decay was accelerating. Liquidity compression from war spending and rising deficits strained the foundation of the Bretton Woods system. The US needed dollars to remain the center of global trade. But here's the twist. The world was losing faith in the dollar itself. The first hidden vulnerability appeared when major nations began demanding gold instead of paper claims. Structural fragility spiked. Washington feared a catastrophic capital flight dynamic that could shatter its economic dominance. But the real villain here wasn't any single rival nation. It was the financial architecture the U.S. created, a system that needed infinite foreign demand for dollars, even as its own discipline collapsed. That contradiction set the stage for the greatest monetary pivot in modern history. The pressure trickled down to everyday people worldwide. Inflation eroded savings. Imports soared in cost. A sense of creeping instability spread across societies already strained by recession. But what happens next changes everything. Desperate for survival, America searched for a commodity powerful enough to anchor monetary trust and weaponize global dependence. Oil was the perfect target. Yet transforming oil into a monetary tool required more than diplomacy. It required secrecy, leverage, and a partner willing to reshape the world economy in exchange for protection. The first move came not from Washington, but from an unexpected corner of the Middle East. At the center of this conspiracy stood three players whose incentives converged in a way textbooks never explain. First, the United States Treasury, scrambling to maintain dollar supremacy after abandoning the gold standard. Second, the Saudi royal family, suddenly flush with power but facing existential threats from rivals. Third, the global banking elite, institutions, whose survival depended on recycling petrodollars into Western financial markets. But here's the twist. None of them trusted each other. The villain in this story is the hidden incentive structure linking oil exports to dollar liquidity. It looked like cooperation. In truth, it was mutual dependence wrapped in fear. The Saudis needed military protection. The US needed oil priced in dollars. And global banks needed a flood of petro surpluses to keep leverage machines running. Reverse expectation. The stability of the 1970s oil world was built not on strength, but on deep institutional fragility. For ordinary people, the consequences were immediate. Oil shocks crushed household budgets. Industries collapsed under soaring energy costs. Entire communities were displaced as inflation shredded economic certainty. And this part is almost never taught. The crisis wasn't purely natural. It was enhanced by strategic choices made in boardrooms far from public view. But another player was operating just outside the frame, a nation whose own crisis would push the United States into a secret deal that reshaped global power. A deal almost no one believed possible. And that hidden nation would strike first. Energy tensions surged as the Middle East fractured under rising political turmoil. The 1973 oil embargo hit like a financial earthquake. Prices quadrupled. Supply chains froze. Liquidity compression tightened across global markets. But here's the twist. The embargo exposed not Arab strength, but Western vulnerability. The villain, the emerging petrodollar architecture, wasn't born yet. But its shadow was forming. This displacement stage, as Kindleberger describes, pushed nations into reactive panic. U.S. policymakers feared a full-blown collapse of monetary credibility. Geopolitical disequilibrium deepened. In Europe, factories shut down. In Asia, blackouts became common. Households everywhere faced soaring living costs. The human cost was immense. Families rationed heating. Transportation halted. And unemployment surged. Viewer question: do you think the oil embargo was a political act, or a financial turning point engineered by deeper forces? Comment below this video in the comments section, and let us know your thoughts on this. But what happens next changes everything. In the midst of chaos, Washington saw an opportunity, not to stabilize markets, but to redesign the global system. Reverse expectation. The solution would come not from diplomacy, but from a covert pact that merged security alliances with monetary strategy. A small U.S. delegation quietly flew to Riyadh under total secrecy. The first domino fell in 1974 during a series of meetings so classified that even senior U.S. officials were kept out. Treasury Secretary William Simon negotiated directly with the Saudi leadership. The proposal was radical: price all Saudi oil exclusively in U.S. dollars, and reinvest those dollars into American bonds. In exchange, the U.S. But here's the twist. This wasn't a rescue plan. It was an empire reboot. The counterintuitive outcome was immediate. Instead of stabilizing oil markets, the deal created an embedded global demand for dollars, regardless of America's fiscal discipline. Structural fragility shifted outward. Every nation now needed dollars to buy energy. And that dependence locked them into the very system they feared. Human consequence. Developing nations fell deeper into debt as oil import bills soared. Triggering poverty cycles still felt today. This move also unleashed a capital flight dynamic. Petrodollars surged into U.S. financial markets. Wall Street expanded its leverage engines. Global banks grew addicted to the flow. The villain, the petrodollar architecture, tightened its grip, gaining a power no military could match. And yet, a mystery remained. Why did Saudi Arabia agree so quickly? What unseen pressure forced their hand? The answer lies in a threat that almost toppled the kingdom. The real hidden actor wasn't Washington or Riyadh. It was a force almost no one associates with the petrodollar's birth. Regional instability engineered by rival powers seeking to undermine Saudi leadership. Intelligence assessments at the time warned that the kingdom faced existential threats from both internal factions and neighboring regimes. But here's the twist. These destabilizing pressures made Saudi Arabia desperate for a protector, giving the U.S. unprecedented leverage. The mechanism silently driving the new system was the institutional incentive stack created by this vulnerability. The Saudis needed survival. The U.S. needed dollar demand. Global banks needed petro-surpluses to recycle. Structural fragility was reframed as opportunity. The villain, a financial architecture built on dependency, escalated. It turned oil from a commodity into a monetary anchor held in place by fear rather than trust. The human consequences were profound. Across the Middle East, political tensions intensified as nations realized their sovereignty was being reshaped by external deals. Ordinary citizens experienced rising repression, economic shocks, and widening inequality. Yet policymakers in the West whispered a different question. What happens when the kingdom itself becomes the linchpin of global liquidity? Reverse expectation. The petrodollar wasn't designed to stabilize the world. It was designed to stabilize the American empire during a moment of near collapse. And now, the crisis timeline truly begins. The first phase of the crisis timeline began when petrodollars flooded global markets far faster than policymakers anticipated. Liquidity fracture emerged. Too many dollars chased too few productive assets. Banks recycled Saudi surpluses into loans across Latin America, Africa, and parts of Asia. But here's the twist. This wasn't generosity. It was an attempt to re-inject liquidity into a fragile system that couldn't survive without constant flow. Kindleberger warned that expansion during periods of disequilibrium often masks deeper instability. Empire cycle decay accelerates when financial leverage expands faster than underlying economic strength. Structural fragility multiplied as nations became trapped in a loop of borrowing dollars to buy oil, then borrowing again to service that debt. Human consequence. Entire populations fell into poverty as austerity regimes were imposed to repay loans they never consented to. Reverse expectation. The petrodollar didn't create global stability. It created synchronized vulnerability. A single shock could collapse multiple regions. And this part is almost never taught. The next phase of the crisis was triggered not by oil itself, but by a decision made in Washington that forced the world into a spiral of debt and desperation. That decision would arrive like a financial thunderstrike.
The fatal flaw emerged in the early 1980s when the Federal Reserve unleashed the Volcker shock, a ruthless interest rate hike designed to crush inflation. But here's the twist. It didn't just impact America. It detonated the entire petrodollar recycling system. Global borrowers suddenly faced impossible repayment burdens. Capital flight dynamics intensified as dollars rushed back into United States assets. Liquidity compression shattered developing economies. This wasn't a natural crisis. It was the predictable outcome of a system where one empire controlled the cost of global money. The villain, the petrodollar architecture, showed its teeth. Dollar scarcity became a geopolitical weapon. Nations defaulted. Banking systems collapsed. Human consequence. Families lost homes. Jobs vanished overnight. And social unrest erupted across continents. Viewer question: do you think the Volcker shock was an economic necessity or a strategic play that strengthened United States dominance at everyone else's expense? Comment below this video in the comments section and let us know your thoughts on this. Reverse expectation. Many nations believed the United States would help stabilize the crisis. Instead, austerity programs and structural adjustments were imposed with near-imperial authority. The crisis timeline escalated from financial stress to systemic breakdown. But the deepest collapse was still ahead. A collapse hidden inside America itself.
As global economies unraveled, the US faced its own internal shocks. The manufacturing base hollowed out. Real wages stagnated. Wealth concentrated in financial sectors addicted to petrodollar flows. And here's the twist. America's apparent strength masked growing structural fragility. The empire cycle decayed from within, even as the dollar dominated abroad. Comparative history shows the pattern clearly. The British Empire relied on sterling-based trade structures long after its production power declined. Similarly, the petrodollar gave America a temporary shield against decline, but at the cost of rising inequality and shrinking resilience. Human consequence: millions of workers faced layoffs, community collapse, and rising despair as industries moved offshore to preserve profit margins fueled by global liquidity arbitrage. Reverse expectation. The petrodollar seemed like a stabilizer. In reality, it acted as an amplifier of both wealth and instability. Liquidity compression abroad created booms on Wall Street while hollowing out domestic industries. Kindleberger would call this the illusion phase, the moment before systemic cracks become too large to ignore. And this part is almost never taught. The same system that empowered America also weakened its core. And the next transformation would push the world into a new era of monetary conflict. Because the climax was approaching, a moment when nations finally rebelled.
By the late 1990s and early 2000s, cracks in the petrodollar order widened. Nations began exploring escape routes, euro pricing, barter arrangements, regional trade blocs. But here's the twist. Attempts to break from the dollar often triggered geopolitical pressure, sanctions, or regime change fear. The villain, the petrodollar architecture, defended itself aggressively. The climax came when multiple nations, including Iraq and later others, experimented with selling oil outside the dollar. This challenged the core incentive structure holding the system together. Structural fragility turned into geopolitical confrontation. Liquidity compression struck emerging markets as dollar access tightened. Human consequence. Entire populations suffered as conflicts, sanctions, and financial crises collided. A modern parallel emerges here. Hard money advocates often cite this period to illustrate why decentralized stores of value, like Bitcoin, gained cultural momentum, not as replacements for oil-based monetary systems, but as examples of assets resistant to political manipulation. Yet even this comparison reveals something deeper. The world was searching for alternatives to a system built on fear and dependence. Reverse expectation. The petrodollar didn't collapse. It adapted, evolved, and entrenched itself through new alliances, surveillance systems, and financial tools. But a new world was forming, one where rival empires plotted their escape, and the aftermath would reshape everything.
The aftermath of the petrodollar's global ascent reshaped political and financial institutions in ways few citizens understood. The system hardened. U.S. policymakers built new security alliances, surveillance frameworks, and financial enforcement tools to ensure the dollar remained the world's energy gateway. But here's the twist. These measures were not defensive. They were preemptive, designed to suppress any challenge before it could destabilize the architecture. The villain, once shadowy, was now institutionalized power itself. Emerging economies were forced into structural adjustments imposed by global lenders operating within the petrodollar's incentive system. Reinhardt and Rogoff describe this phase as the consolidation of creditor dominance. For ordinary citizens, the human cost was steep: cuts to social programs, wage compression, and weakened public infrastructure. Nations that attempted independent monetary paths faced capital flight dynamics engineered through market fear rather than military force. Reverse expectation. The petrodollar didn't lift the world into prosperity. It divided it. A small elite class in financial centers thrived, while developing countries bore the volatility created by a monetary regime they never chose. Institutional incentives locked governments into cycles of debt dependency. Structural fragility became a permanent global feature. But here's the part almost never taught. As America strengthened external dominance, its internal fractures widened. Economic inequality surged. Entire towns decayed. Citizens felt like characters trapped inside a system designed for distant institutions, not human well-being. And now, a new challenger was emerging, one powerful enough to threaten the system's foundation. Today, the petrodollar faces pressures unlike any in its 50-year lifespan. Rising multipolar competition, regional trade alliances, and alternative payment networks challenge the dollar's role in energy markets. But here's the twist. The threat is not purely geopolitical. It's technological. Digital settlement systems, commodity-backed trade blocs, and national payment rails reduce reliance on dollar clearing pathways, eroding the architecture's hidden advantage. A mandatory crypto parallel fits here. As nations explore alternatives, Bitcoin and similar hard money assets became cultural symbols of resistance against centralized monetary control. Not replacements for petrodollar energy systems, but illustrations of how societies seek escape from institutional fragility. They serve as a mirror, revealing the deep desire for systems not governed by political discretion. Viewer question: do you think digital currencies, state-backed or decentralized, will meaningfully weaken the dollar's dominance in energy markets? Comment below this video in the comments section and let us know your thoughts on this. Reverse expectation: despite global innovations, the petrodollar remains resilient. Its strength lies less in oil and more in entrenched institutional incentives. But structural tension is rising. The next phase won't be defined by a single shock. It will be defined by a global shift already underway. And this shift points to a future far more volatile than the past. The petrodollar system reveals a lesson investors rarely study. Monetary power doesn't come from stability. It comes from managing global dependency. Karl Polanyi warned that markets embedded in political structures inevitably generate social backlash. Kindleberger showed that systems built on asymmetric leverage always create boom-bust cycles. Reinhardt and Rogoff demonstrated that debt-based expansion eventually turns into crisis when institutional incentives collide with economic reality. But here's the twist: the petrodollar embodies all three frameworks at once. For investors, the hidden lesson is clear. Empire cycle decay often produces the illusion of strength right before structural fragility emerges. Capital flows appear stable, until they don't. Countries look secure, until access to global liquidity evaporates. Reverse expectation: wealth is made not by trusting the dominant system, but by understanding its breaking points. Human consequence: societies that fail to adapt early face the full cost of volatility imposed by distant powers. As Finance Arcana always reminds us, money moves in shadows long before it moves markets. And today, those shadows are lengthening. Supply chains shift. Energy alliances realign. Nations quietly prepare for a world where the dollar's supremacy is no longer guaranteed. The question isn't whether the system will change. It's what force will trigger the next transformation. The future of the petrodollar sits on a razor's edge. Rising multipolar blocks coordinate energy pricing discussions outside traditional dollar pathways. Nations accumulate gold reserves at the fastest pace in modern history. Digital settlement networks bypass United States controlled rails. But here's the twist: the greatest threat to the petrodollar may come not from abroad, but from America's own political fragmentation and fiscal trajectory. Structural fragility is internalizing. Scenario 1: geopolitical disequilibrium accelerates, pushing rival empires to form commodity-backed trade zones. Scenario 2: liquidity compression triggers a global scramble for dollars, reinforcing the system temporarily while deepening inequality. Scenario 3: institutional incentives inside the United States prevent reform until a crisis forces redesign. Human consequence: ordinary people worldwide face higher energy prices, volatile currencies, and declining purchasing power. Viewer question: which scenario do you think is most likely? Geopolitical fracture, dollar resurgence, or systemic redesign? Comment below this video in the comments section and let us know your thoughts on this. Reverse expectation: despite its vulnerabilities, the petrodollar may endure longer than critics expect. Systems built on dependency rarely collapse suddenly. They erode, mutate, and shift, but the signals are unmistakable. Empire cycle decay has begun to reshape global behavior. And the finale brings us to the deepest question of all. The petrodollar story is not just about oil, money, or power. It is about the human desire for stability in a world shaped by hidden structures. But here's the twist. Every monetary order in history eventually confronts the same fate. The contradictions sustaining it become too large to ignore. And when that moment arrives, societies must choose between denial and transformation. Emotional shift, from fear to clarity. The petrodollar granted America unmatched influence. Yet it also carried immense costs, rising inequality, financial fragility, and global dependence enforced through silent coercion. Reverse expectation. The system may not end with a dramatic collapse. It may fade through slow realignment as nations adopt diversified settlement tools and new alliances. Human consequence. Billions will feel these shifts in food prices, wages, savings, and political stability. Tell us in the comments what topic you want us to uncover next. Comment below this video in the comments section and let us know your thoughts on this. As we close this episode, remember, the true power of financial history lies not in what happened, but in the patterns that repeat. And the petrodollar's trajectory hints at a future where monetary dominance becomes a battleground of technology, energy, and empire. Because in the next episode, we uncover the force already positioning itself to challenge the world's most powerful currency. Thanks for watching The Petrodollar Conspiracy: How Oil Became America's Invisible Weapon. If this episode blew your mind even a little, smash that like button, share this video with someone who loves crazy finance stories, and hit subscribe so you never miss the next big reveal on Finance Arcana. We have more wild episodes coming in our forbidden history. You will not want to miss them.